Content warning. This episode contains references to sexual assault, survivor trauma, and systemic misconduct. The content may be distressing for some listeners. If you or someone you know needs support, contact 1-800-RESPECT on 1-800-737-732.
And just to be clear, the story you're about to hear is based on verified survivor testimony, documented evidence, and public interest reporting. Identities have been protected where appropriate, making sure the focus stays on the survivor's own narrative and, well, the systemic issues that come up.
We approach this story through a trauma-informed, survivor-led lens. That means we prioritize the well-being and, crucially, the voice of the individual right at the center of this deeply personal and really impactful account.
Absolutely.
I'm the Illuminator.
And I'm the architect.
You're listening to the Underground Deep Dive, a deep dive produced by Underground Media Network. We investigate what power tries to bury.
We center survivors, we dismantle silence, and we demand accountability from institutions that have, frankly, failed.
This deep dive was produced under the editorial direction of Landon Germanata Mills, editor-in-chief of Underground Media Network. Today's story, it's not just about one woman.
No, it really isn't. It's about the systems that seem to break people twice, first through violence and then, devastatingly, through silence.
This is Amy's ordeal, seeking justice from NSW police.
And what's truly compelling here, I think, is how a single, profoundly personal story can just illuminate a much larger, often quite hidden narrative. We're talking about institutional accountability.
Right.
And the just devastating impact of systemic failures on individual lives. Our mission today is really to extract the most important nuggets of knowledge from the sources we have.
We want to help you understand the timeline, the key people involved, and importantly, the deeper, far-reaching implications of Amy's courageous fight for justice.
Yeah, we're going to walk through this complex narrative step by step. We'll try to reveal how past decisions can ripple right into the present.
And how one woman's resilience really challenges the very foundations of power. Okay, let's unpack this then. Our deep dive begins 2 decades ago. We're going back to 2004.
Yeah.
This is when Amy, who was then legally known as Amy McGill, was just 12 years old.
12. It's hard to even fathom, really.
It really is. Imagine, if you can, the vulnerability of being 12.
Yeah.
At that age, Amy traveled to The Rock. Now, that's a small town, about 35 kilometers from Wagga Wagga in rural New South Wales.
Right.
She was there to visit an adult relative.
Mm.
And it was during that weekend visit, which, should have been safe, should have been about family connection.
Absolutely.
That Amy was subjected to deeply traumatizing experiences.
Mm.
The sources are very clear on this. This wasn't just some fleeting childhood incident.
No, it sounds like it cast a very long, very dark shadow.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It profoundly shaped her experiences, her sense of safety, her future relationships, pretty much everything.
And what stands out immediately with just incredible clarity and, frankly, courage is Amy's response right after returning home. She told the truth. She spoke up.
Which is just a profound act for a child, isn't it? Especially given the severity, the intimate nature of what she'd endured.
Oh, absolutely. It takes immense internal fortitude for a 12-year-old to even articulate experiences like that to adults.
Particularly authority figures like police, child welfare.
Exactly. She was relying completely on the system, the one designed to protect her, to validate her truth, provide justice, support.
Everything she needed.
Yeah. And this initial brave act of speaking out, it really set the stage for everything that followed. It highlights the immense trust a child places in these protective systems.
And, tragically, the devastating consequences when that trust is betrayed.
She did her part, bravely, unequivocally.
Yeah, she did.
So this brings us to an absolutely critical question, doesn't it? It's really at the heart of this deep dive.
What happens?
What happens when a child survivor seeks help from the very institution meant to provide it, and that foundational trust isn't just unmet, but, as the sources seem to suggest, actively betrayed?
It's chilling to think about.
In Amy's case, she was accompanied by her mother and a DCJ worker, that's Department of Communities and Justice, an official government agency worker for child protection.
So they followed the official channels.
Completely. They turned to the authorities who should have provided immediate safeguarding. They went to the Wagga Wagga police station.
And that's where she encountered Detective Karen Webb.
Yes, that Karen Webb, who years later, as you mentioned, would rise to become the commissioner of NSW Police.
The connection is just stark. It's not coincidence. It ties the highest levels of current police leadership directly back to this specific historical failure in Amy's case.
Right. So picture the scene, if you will. A 12-year-old girl, having just summoned every bit of courage to recount her trauma,
Yeah.
is told by Detective Webb that there was no evidence to proceed unless she herself testified in court
At 12.
at 12. Think about the incredible burden placed on a traumatized child. The onus was completely on her to relive and articulate her pain in a formal, intimidating court setting.
It's just unthinkable, overwhelmed, confused, likely re-traumatized by just that dismissal.
And the huge hurdle of court testimony, she declined, which is totally understandable.
Of course.
And with that single decision, the case was closed.
Amy's own words on this are just devastating. She says, they didn't just close a file, they closed a life.
It gives you chills, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And the sources are incredibly stark, almost clinical, about the immediate institutional neglect that followed.
What did they say?
No follow-up, no support, no protection, in capitals.
Wow.
This wasn't just an administrative closure, it was an abandonment. It left a vulnerable child to navigate immense, complex trauma completely alone.
Effectively silencing her truth right from the start.
And sending this clear, devastating message that her experience just wasn't worthy of official recognition or intervention.
The impact of that initial dismissal, it just can't be overstated, can it? It fundamentally deepened her trauma instead of helping.
It set a dangerous precedent for her understanding of justice, of safety.
Here's where it gets, well, incredibly poignant, and where you really start to see the long-term consequences of that institutional failure unfolding in Amy's life.
Yeah, the ripple effects.
The sources reveal that the trauma Amy experienced at 12, it wasn't just a moment in time, was it? It became this defining force, a deeply ingrained pattern shaping so much of what came next.
That institutional failure to respond when she was so young, so vulnerable, it created this vacuum of protective care.
Leaving her profoundly susceptible, it seems, to repeating patterns of disempowerment and control.
Think about the psychological impact. A young person already taught by authority figures that her pain wasn't evidence enough, that her voice wasn't valid enough for protection.
You'd naturally be more vulnerable, less equipped to navigate healthy boundaries later on.
Exactly. And the sources illustrate this quite directly. They reveal that by the age of 15, Amy entered a relationship with a man who was more than a decade older than her.
And this isn't framed as just coincidence, is it?
No, not at all. The sources describe it as a form of conditioning, a direct and, frankly, tragic consequence of that unresolved trauma and the stark lack of protective intervention from the system.
The system designed to safeguard children.
Right. She subsequently experienced, and these are the words used, patterns of control and fear that echoed what the system had failed to interrupt.
It speaks to that insidious way trauma manifests, doesn't it? When a child's trust is broken by authority, they might internalize that powerlessness, that unworthiness.
Which can then make them more susceptible to environments or relationships where control and fear feel, well, almost normalized, because their first formative experience with authority failed to protect them.
It just highlights how unchecked trauma can lead to this cycle of vulnerability, shaping a person's life in ways that are deeply rooted in their past experiences and the responses or lack thereof from those meant to provide safety.
That absence of support essentially paved the way for further experiences of disempowerment. It just underscores the profound long-term ripple effects of that initial dismissal.
So if we connect this to the bigger picture, Amy's story really vividly demonstrates how institutional neglect can lead to lasting vulnerability and these complex, even multi-generational impacts.
Absolutely. Her early experiences cast such a long shadow, manifesting in all sorts of grief and struggle throughout her life. The sources reveal she became pregnant and then tragically miscarried at 16 weeks.
Oh, that's heartbreaking.
And this loss, as she describes it, wasn't just biological. It was deeply emotional, spiritual, interwoven with her existing trauma, maybe a heightened sense of vulnerability.
She calls her miscarried child her angel son.
Yeah, and she says, with this heartbreaking clarity, he was part of my story even if he never got to take a breath. That grief changed me. It made me want to protect what matters.
Wow. That's incredibly powerful. It shows her resilience, doesn't it? Even facing such loss, it became a catalyst for change, a renewed purpose to protect others.
It did. And she later had 2 daughters, who are now 14 and 12.
Around the same age she was.
Exactly, which must be such a poignant, probably amplifying parallel. It clearly fuels her determination for justice, for herself and her kids.
And the sources mention ongoing family issues too, right? Stemming from that lack of support.
Yeah, absolutely. It illustrates the complex, enduring challenges. For instance, her mother recently needed an AVO, an apprehended violence order.
A protection order.
Right, and the sources allege police failed to provide adequate support for this AVO, even when there was a physical threat involving a weapon.
Seriously.
And Amy herself actually intervened in this dangerous situation, putting herself at risk, getting injured. It just underscores her continued role as a protector in her family, often at her own expense.
These aren't just isolated incidents, then. They seem symptomatic of a life lived in the wake of that significant institutional failure.
Where just maintaining safety and well-being becomes this constant struggle, there are also concerns mentioned about her eldest daughter's living situation because of her father's alleged drug involvement.
It's just heartbreaking, that ripple effect across generations.
It really is. These details paint such a vivid picture of how one critical institutional failure in childhood can lead to a lifetime of interconnected difficulties. It highlights the profound need for early effective intervention and real support for survivors.
It's a stark reminder that neglecting one trauma can just open the door to a whole cascade of vulnerabilities and struggles, not just for the individual, but for their whole family.
And there's another layer of loss mentioned too. Amy talks about losing old photos because her Facebook account was hacked.
Oh, no.
Yeah, and these photos apparently included images that seemed to show injuries. They were actually requested by the journalist for her story, maybe as corroborating evidence.
So losing even potential evidence adds another layer of difficulty.
Exactly. It just illustrates the layers of disruption and loss Amy has endured, extending even to the records that could support her memories and experiences. This whole web of challenges just underscores the profound, lasting impact of systemic failures.
So what does this all mean for Amy's personal journey, her quest for justice? The narrative takes a really powerful, inspiring turn in 2021.
Right, this is when things start to shift.
Amy gave birth to a son, and importantly, this was in a safe, supportive relationship.
And this wasn't just a personal milestone, was it? It sounds like it was a real catalyst.
A profound catalyst.
Yeah.
A moment of awakening. The sources say it reignited her voice and her sense of purpose.
Becoming a mother in a secure environment seems to have given her the strength, the clarity, the renewed determination to confront the silence that had defined so much of her life.
Yeah, she swore with this unwavering conviction that her son never inherit my silence.
Wow.
Asserting that what happened to me was never okay. We all have voices, and we never let silence protect the wrong people.
That's an incredibly powerful declaration.
It isn't just about her own healing, is it? It's a declaration of a new purpose, a fierce determination to ensure the injustices she faced don't ripple through future generations.
It shows a deep understanding of intergenerational trauma and a real commitment to breaking that cycle for herself, her kids, and maybe others who've been silenced.
It really marks an inspiring transformation, from that silenced child who felt she had no evidence to this resolute, articulate advocate ready to face the very system that dismissed her.
It underscores that deep human desire for agency and the profound courage it takes to reclaim your narrative after years of suppression.
And what's truly fascinating here is Amy's unwavering resolve, her methodical, almost strategic approach to confronting the system that had dismissed her for so long.
Right, she doesn't just stay silent.
No. In 2022, exactly 2 decades after her initial case was closed, she bravely asks NSW police to reopen it.
And their response.
It was a stark, and you have to think, re-traumatizing echo of her childhood experience. They declined.
Declined. Why?
Stating her file was closed in 2004 with no evidence written prominently on it.
Unbelievable. It's the same dismissal 2 decades later.
Exactly. It replicates the very invalidation she experienced as a 12-year-old. And it reveals this shocking lack of proactive engagement or any kind of trauma-informed practice within the system.
So no one reached out in those 20 years.
She was never recontacted. Her file never re-examined. Crucially, no one from the police even asked if she was ready now to provide testimony if her circumstances had changed.
Or if she'd like to engage in a process that actually acknowledged the impact of her initial experience.
No. Instead, she was basically told to do the police's work for them. She was advised she would need to subpoena her own records.
Subpoena her own trauma statement that she gave them.
Yes. This bureaucratic hurdle just speaks volumes, doesn't it?
It really does.
Amy's own statement on this is so powerful it cuts right to the core. The fact I need a subpoena to access my own trauma tells me something is being protected, and it's not me.
That hits hard. It highlights her perception, rooted in 2 decades of experience, that the system is maybe more concerned with self-preservation,
Protecting its own processes, its personnel.
rather than genuinely seeking truth and justice for survivors. And her original statement from 2004, it's still sealed.
Still sealed. She hasn't been allowed access.
Yeah.
It just cements this perception of, well, obfuscation and institutional resistance.
Yes, despite all this, despite the resistance, the re-traumatization of being dismissed again, her resolve only hardened.
Yeah, she declared, with this powerful voice of a survivor no longer bound by fear, "I was too afraid to speak at 12, but I'm 34 now, and I'm ready."
That declaration, it's a real turning point, isn't it? Signaling her unwavering commitment to pursue justice on her own terms.
With the maturity, the strength, the purpose that 2 decades of survival have forged.
It's a testament to the enduring human spirit against formidable systemic barriers.
Now, Amy's relentless fight for justice, it didn't happen in a vacuum, did it? It gained significant momentum, public visibility, through the intervention of the underground media network.
Right, this independent media platform played a really crucial role here.
Amy initially contacted Landon Germanata Mills, who is a Wiradjuri freelance investigative journalist and criminologist, on April 6, 2025.
How did she find him?
She was referred by a woman named Michelle. It suggests there's maybe a network of survivors and advocates working to connect people with resources.
That makes sense.
And what's really remarkable, and such a stark contrast to her experiences with law enforcement,
Yeah.
is Landon's immediate response. He expressed belief in her story right away. No hesitation, no doubt.
Wow. That immediate validation must have been huge for her.
Absolutely. That, plus the offer of support under journalistic protection frameworks, it was clearly pivotal. It provided the trust and security that had just been absent before.
And the underground media network itself, their approach is quite specific, isn't it?
Very specific. They explicitly describe themselves as conducting survivor-led investigative journalism, their aim.
Yeah.
To hold power to account.
So not your typical news outlet.
Definitely not. Their mission statement is clear, powerful, intentional, exposing corruption, racism, and silent survivor stories mainstream media won't touch. They proudly state they provide journalism with teeth.
That approach, survivor-led, what does that mean in practice?
It means prioritizing the survivor's voice and lived experience above all else, ensuring their narrative is at the absolute center of the investigation, not filtered or diluted or dismissed by traditional gatekeepers or, corporate interests.
So it avoids censoring or sanitizing the truth to protect powerful institutions or people.
Exactly. It's about empowering the person who's been disempowered. And it clearly formed this powerful ethical partnership between Amy seeking justice and a media outlet committed to amplifying these suppressed truths.
Providing a platform where her decades-long silence could finally be broken and her truth heard.
Yeah.
So this partnership, it really raises an important question about the role, the often challenging role, of independent media in uncovering truths that powerful institutions might, well, prefer to keep buried or deny.
Underground Media Network acted swiftly, purposefully, didn't they?
They did, leveraging that survivor-led approach. They published Amy's story in several articles, showing their commitment to comprehensive survivor-centric reporting.
There were different versions.
Yeah, one version initially titled, "She was 12, she told the truth, police shut her down," very direct, captured public attention, laid bare the facts of her dismissal.
Right.
But then, recognizing the absolute importance of Amy's direct voice and agency, a second version was meticulously rewritten and published.
How was that different?
It was explicitly designed to center Amy's voice and lived experience. The title became, "I was 12, I told the truth, police shut me down."
Putting her eyes right at the forefront.
Exactly. And this version was shared with Amy by Landon Germanata Mills himself on May 4th, 2025. This emphasis on ensuring the narrative genuinely reflects the survivor's perspective, using her own words, her framing. It's a hallmark of survivor-led journalism.
It's deliberately handing the narrative power back to the individual.
Precisely, allowing Amy's raw truth to resonate directly, powerfully with readers.
And the impact of these publications, the visibility they provided, it was immediate, wasn't it? And sounds profoundly validating for Amy.
Oh, hugely. On April 24th, 2025, Amy herself took to social media, clearly empowered by the visibility and support her story was getting.
What did she say?
She declared with this triumphant tone, "Can't shut me down no more. I'm not that 12-year-old girl anymore."
That's amazing. A powerful testament to her transformation.
Absolutely. And she actively encouraged others to share her story if they believe truth still matters. She wasn't just aiming for personal justice, but trying to mobilize public support, show her fight was part of a larger collective pursuit of truth and accountability.
And did people respond?
Massively. The social media comments showed this wave of heartfelt support. People praising her bravery, expressing hope for justice, things like, "Proud of you for growing a voice and speaking up. I hope you find the justice you deserve." And, "So proud of you for finding your voice and speaking up, babe. You're going to give other victims a voice and know they can stand up and speak too." Just an outpouring.
That public support must have not only validated her journey, but also shown this huge public appetite for accountability, right?
Exactly. Accountability from institutions and for giving a voice to those historically marginalized. It really reinforced the impact of independent, survivor-led journalism in potentially affecting change and fostering a community around these shared experiences of injustice.
Okay, here's where the pieces of this complex puzzle really start to lock together, adding this layer of significant historical and institutional context to Amy's personal ordeal.
The Karen Webb connection again?
Yes, the sources explicitly named Detective Karen Webb as the officer who took Amy's statement and then subsequently closed her case back in 2004.
It's not just a peripheral detail, is it? It's this direct, undeniable, deeply unsettling link.
It really is. This is the very same Karen Webb who 2 decades later rose through the ranks to become the commissioner of NSW Police, the highest office in the state's police force.
Think about that. The child who was dismissed, silenced by a junior officer,
Now finds herself, as an adult woman, demanding answers from that exact same individual who now sits at the very pinnacle of the police force.
the officer who allegedly claimed no evidence in 2004, effectively shutting down a 12-year-old's brave truth.
Is now the public face of the institution Amy is fighting against, the institution she's calling to account.
This direct intersection of past and present, it doesn't just underscore the deep personal nature of Amy's quest, does it? It raises profound questions.
The accountability, institutional memory, how dismissals from decades ago might contribute to or even exemplify a systemic culture of neglect and silence.
It's a stark illustration of how individual actions, especially by authority figures, can have these enduring, far-reaching consequences that eventually, remarkably, come full circle to demand a reckoning.
That specific connection gives this powerful, almost poetic symmetry to Amy's unwavering struggle.
And if we connect this to the broader picture, it becomes really clear that Amy's demands for answers 2 decades later, they aren't happening in isolation. They're not just a personal vendetta.
Right, there was other stuff going on with Commissioner Webb.
Yes. Commissioner Karen Webb's tenure, as the sources highlight, was already marked by public controversies, leadership missteps, and she'd been grappling with rising scandals and public backlash from various quarters, even before Amy's story gained this prominence.
So this broader context is crucial then. It suggests Amy's story is surfacing at a time when the commissioner's leadership is already under intense scrutiny.
Exactly, from multiple directions, making it part of a much larger narrative, it seems, of pervasive institutional issues within NSW Police.
And then came the resignation news.
Right. On May 7th, 2025, a really significant development. 9 News Sydney reported that Commissioner Webb was expected to resign.
Despite having almost 2 years left on her 5-year term.
Yeah. This abrupt departure, especially for the first woman to lead the NSW police force, it speaks volumes about the depth, the breadth of the challenges and controversies she faced.
And Underground Media Network followed up on this.
Promptly.
Oh.
True to their mission of holding power to account, they published an article titled "Caught in the Web: The Unraveling of NSW Police Commissioner Karen Webb," detailing her fall amidst these widespread controversies.
Linking her resignation to broader accountability failures and systemic issues.
Precisely. And what's really telling, and must have been incredibly validating for Amy, is her reaction to this news.
What did she say?
On May 8th, 2025, Amy, posted on social media about Webb's impending resignation. She didn't hold back. She stated that Webb's incompetence and mistakes had finally caught up to her.
It sounds like a personal validation of her long-held conviction that something was fundamentally wrong.
It does. But crucially, Amy used this moment to reassert that her own story still matters, and she will finish it and finish my whole damn book now that she is an adult.
So, Webb's resignation might be a victory for broader accountability, but for Amy, it's just one step in her much longer, deeply personal quest.
Exactly. That direct intersection of her individual quest with the public downfall of a key figure from her past just amplifies the immense weight and significance of her story within the larger narrative of institutional reform.
So what does this all mean beyond Amy's individual story? As powerful, as vital as that is, the sources strongly suggest her experience isn't an anomaly, is it?
No, it seems to be presented as a distressing symptom of a larger, deeply entrenched issue, what the sources describe as a broken culture inside NSW police.
And this is more than just isolated incidents, right? More than a few bad apples.
It seems so. It speaks to a systemic pathology, a pervasive environment where the very mechanisms designed to protect can instead enable harm and silence.
And the Underground Media Network's reporting series, Beneath the Badge, delves into this.
Yes, extensively. It reveals that Amy's story is heartbreakingly just one of many. The series brings forward compelling testimonies from other survivors who faced similar dismissals.
And whistleblowers, former officers.
Exactly. People coming forward with alarmingly similar experiences under various NSW police leaderships.
So this growing collection of accounts, it paints a consistent, deeply concerning picture.
It does, indicating that the issues Amy faced aren't aberrations, but perhaps symptomatic of deeply ingrained institutional behaviors.
Suggesting a pattern where the structures designed to uphold justice are, in practice, enabling a culture of disregard and silence.
Which transforms Amy's personal ordeal from an isolated tragedy into this powerful indictment of a larger systemic problem, highlighting the urgent need for comprehensive internal reform, going far beyond just individual leadership changes.
It raises really uncomfortable questions, doesn't it? About what happens when a culture prioritizes self-preservation over public trust and accountability.
And the impact that has on countless individual lives.
And what's truly unsettling here is how the sources articulate the deliberate, almost calculated nature of this systemic failure. It's not presented as just occasional oversight or accidental negligence.
No, the pattern described within NSW police is chillingly consistent. Reports ignored, cases downgraded, victims discredited, officers protected.
That sounds almost like policy.
Well, the sources explicitly state with profound weight that the silence isn't accidental, it's operational.
Operational. What does that imply?
It implies a systematic, potentially deliberate strategy within the institution to manage information, suppress complaints, shield personnel, even at the devastating expense of justice for victims.
So a system where the default isn't to investigate thoroughly, but maybe to manage risk, protect the institution's image.
Perhaps. That might involve downplaying reports, subtly discrediting victim testimony through bureaucratic hurdles, or creating an internal environment where reporting misconduct is discouraged, maybe even penalized.
Suggesting a deeply ingrained culture that prioritizes self-preservation, making sure difficult truths stay buried.
And Commissioner Webb herself is directly implicated in this broader pattern, allegedly having turned away from these crucial stories from survivors, whistleblowers, former officers during her tenure.
So it indicates a problem beyond just individual misconduct, an issue within leadership that actively avoids confronting these truths.
That seems to be the implication, perhaps contributing to that operational silence. Underground Media Network's article, What Commissioner Webb Doesn't Want You to Hear, presents these collected stories as direct evidence of this profoundly ingrained institutional issue.
And the police response, or lack thereof, to Amy's story being published.
That's another crucial detail highlighting this alleged institutional silence. When NSW police were specifically contacted for comment on Amy's story by Underground Media Network, no reply was received before publication.
Silence.
Yes. This non-response, consistent with the other allegations, reinforces that perception of unwillingness to engage, a preference for silence over transparency. An institutional posture that seems designed to deflect accountability rather than embrace it.
It paints a stark picture of a system fundamentally resistant to external scrutiny and internal reform.
Leaving survivors like Amy to fight not just for justice, but for the very right to be heard.
Amy's extraordinary journey, then, from that silenced 12-year-old to this powerful advocate, it culminates in clear, unambiguous demands.
Not just vague pleas, but specific steps.
Exactly what she believes she and other survivors truly deserve from NSW police. These are actionable steps towards genuine accountability and systemic change, born from decades of lived experience.
What are they specifically?
Firstly, full access to her own file, which is just astonishing she doesn't have. It's foundational for her to understand what was recorded, what wasn't, who was involved. Transparency denied for too long.
A basic right, really.
Absolutely. Secondly, she calls for a trauma-informed, independent case review.
Which is crucial, acknowledging the original review was inadequate, biased. A new process needs to be sensitive to survivors' needs, prioritizing healing and safety, not just bureaucracy or reputation management.
A trauma-informed approach means understanding the effects of trauma on memory, testimony, creating a supportive environment.
Makes sense. What else?
She also demands transparency over who sealed her records. She wants to know who is responsible for perpetuating her silence, denying her access to her own truth.
Holding individuals accountable within the system.
Yes, and beyond her individual case, Amy insists on a formal acknowledgement of institutional failure, moving past mere apologies to recognizing the system itself failed, not just isolated individuals.
That's a big one. Acknowledging systemic fault.
And finally, perhaps most importantly, she demands genuine reform explicitly, not just media spin. She wants tangible, lasting changes that address that broken culture she and so many others experienced.
Preventing future harm, ensuring no other child endures what she did.
These demands are a powerful blueprint, aren't they? For true justice, systemic overhaul, reflecting her profound understanding of the deep-seated issues.
And this culmination of Amy's fight, it raises an important question for all of us, really. What does it truly take for a survivor to reclaim their voice after decades of silence? Especially when the system that failed them keeps resisting, putting up walls.
Amy's journey is just a profound testament to the transformative power of truth-telling, isn't it? An unwavering resilience against immense adversity.
Her determination, that fundamental shift in self-perception, it's captured so beautifully in her statement. They told me I didn't matter, and for a long time I believed them, but not anymore.
That just encapsulates the journey. From profound disempowerment to courageous self-empowerment, reclaiming her worth, her agency, despite deep institutional neglect.
It speaks to that universal human need for validation and the profound healing that can come from finally being heard, seen, believed.
And the ethical stance of the reporting by Underground Media Network is vital here too, isn't it? Reinforcing that survivor-led nature.
Absolutely vital. Their final note explicitly emphasizes that Amy Elizabeth Daphne Jarrett gave full, informed consent for publishing her name, her formal legal name, her personal history.
That meticulous level of consent is paramount in trauma-informed journalism, ensuring the survivor keeps control over their own narrative, how it's presented.
Completely. And furthermore, the identity of the alleged perpetrator was carefully withheld in line with legal and ethical standards, demonstrating responsible reporting while prioritizing the survivor's well-being and legal protections.
This meticulous approach highlights that Amy's story isn't just news. It's this carefully handled account, designed to empower her voice while upholding the highest ethical standards.
Her fight isn't just for her own justice. It's a beacon of hope, a powerful call to action for countless others who've been similarly silenced, proving that truth, no matter how long suppressed, can indeed find its voice and demand accountability.
So we've journeyed through Amy's harrowing ordeal, from a silenced 12-year-old bravely telling her truth to a fierce advocate demanding answers from the very highest levels of NSW police.
It's a story that really reveals the deep, lasting impact of institutional failure, the profound consequences of a system that seems to default to silence,
and the incredible, almost superhuman resilience required to break through decades of that silence.
And if we connect this back to the bigger picture, Amy's experience serves as the stark, urgent reminder, a reminder of the ongoing need for transparency, profound accountability, and a truly victim-centered approach within our public institutions.
It encourages us, really, to question our assumptions about how justice is served.
And to consider the broader implications of these systemic issues on individual lives, reminding us that every dismissed report, every ignored plea contributes to a larger pattern of injustice that can echo for decades.
So as you reflect on Amy's courageous fight, maybe consider this. If a system designed to protect can instead enable silence and profound harm for decades, what does justice truly look like when it finally arrives? And what is our collective responsibility in ensuring that the truth, no matter how uncomfortable or inconvenient, can no longer be buried?
It's a heavy question, but a necessary one.
Once again, if this deep dive has raised issues for you or someone you know, please remember you are not alone. Support services are available. 1-800-RESPECT, that's 1-800-737-732. Full Stop Australia, 1-800-385-578. Link up NSW, 1-800-624-332, and Lifeline 131114.